The group of bullies at the back of the bus laughed as they grabbed quiet Emma's neck. None of them knew who the man sitting a few seats away was. Emma's father, Jason Miller, the relentless SWAT team leader, saw everything. That moment marked the biggest mistake these bullies would ever make in their lives. It was 7:15 in the morning, and school bus number 42 was proceeding along its usual route. As autumn rain beat against the windows, the inside of the bus was filled with students' conversations, laughter, and occasional shouts. Children from different neighborhoods of the city were making their way to Highland High School. Some were half asleep listening to music, others hurriedly trying to complete homework, while others shared the day's gossip in noisy conversations. Emma Miller sat quietly as usual in the middle rows by the window. At 15, Emma was a student who didn't draw attention with her long brown hair, slim build, and nose almost always buried in a book. She had a light sprinkling of freckles on her face and hazel eyes, though she rarely made direct eye contact with anyone. She generally preferred to stay away from crowds, leading a quiet and calm life. She had friends, but they weren't very close. They were more the type who met in the library to study together. Today she was again immersed in To Kill a Mockingbird, completely forgetting the outside world. Emma's father's profession was a not-quite-secret known by almost everyone at school. Jason Miller was the leader of the city's elite SWAT team, a decorated police officer with 20 years of experience who had served in countless dangerous operations. However, Emma rarely talked about her father's job. She neither boasted nor brought up the subject. While some students thought it was cool, others were uncomfortable, especially children from families who had had trouble with the police. 3 stops later, the bus slowed down, and a man Emma didn't recognize boarded. In his 40s, with piercing eyes and an athletic build, wearing simple jeans and a dark coat, he nodded to the driver and sat in an empty seat, a few rows ahead of Emma. He had a slight scar on his face, above his left eyebrow, a memento from an old operation. No one gave him a second glance. He was just an ordinary passenger in the morning routine. Neither Emma nor the other students on the bus knew that this man was SWAT team leader Jason Miller. Jason would normally drive his daughter to school, but today was a special situation. Before heading to headquarters for an emergency meeting, he wanted to make sure his daughter arrived safely at school. Actually, he had sensed a change in Emma's behavior recently. More withdrawn, quieter, almost as if she was avoiding something. When they discussed it with her mother, Sarah, they thought it might just be part of adolescence. But Jason felt his instincts telling him something wasn't right. He had boarded the bus to surprise Emma, but chose to sit a few rows back so his daughter wouldn't notice him. As the bus started moving again, the noise from the back increased. Brad Stevens and his friends, the stars of the school's football team, were having fun as usual. Brad was 17, broad-shouldered, handsome but arrogant. He was immediately recognizable with his short, well-groomed hair and the football team jacket he always wore. Tyler and Zach beside him were similarly known as the school's popular kids. Tyler, dark-skinned and athletic, was one of the fastest runners at school. Zach, with red hair and a large build, was the team's defensive player. The 3 of them used the back seats of the bus almost like their personal kingdom. No one entered their territory without permission. Other students, especially younger and more vulnerable ones, tried to stay away from them. The school administration generally turned a blind eye to their behavior because the football team was the school's pride, and the championships they won brought prestige and donations to the school. "Hey guys, look what the bookworm is reading again," said Brad, his voice loud and mocking. He pointed at Emma, showing her to his friends. Tyler laughed. "She probably can see without glasses by now, reading so much. Maybe she thinks it'll make her brain bigger," added Zach, letting out a crude laugh. Emma didn't raise her head, trying to ignore them. This was an almost daily routine. Sometimes they stuck to verbal harassment, sometimes they would take her books and throw them to each other. Emma remembered it had started a few months ago. When Brad's father was arrested for drunk driving, Emma's father had been part of the team investigating the incident. Since then, Brad had harbored a special grudge against her. Jason was seated where he could safely ride on the half-full bus. Without making direct eye contact with his daughter, he noticed the activity in the back seats. His trained eyes and sharp senses immediately understood that something wasn't right there. The boys' loud and mocking voices, the aggressiveness in their body language, and when he realized their target was his daughter, he instinctively wanted to act. But years of discipline made him decide to observe the situation rather than immediately intervene. Maybe it was just ordinary high school teasing. He didn't want to overreact. Brad and his friends, seeming bored with Emma's lack of response, got up from their seats. As the bus swayed slightly, they held onto the seats to maintain balance as they moved toward Emma. Jason watched their movements in the mirror, his hand reflexively going to where he would normally carry his weapon, but he wasn't armed today. "Hey, Miller, we're talking to you today," said Brad, sitting in the empty seat in front of Emma. Tyler and Zach settled into seats beside them, effectively surrounding Emma. The girl realized there was no escape now and slowly closed her book. Emma closed her book and began looking out the window. "Please, I just want to read my book," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "Oh, sorry, Professor Miller. We interrupted your great philosophical thoughts," said Brad while his two friends laughed. Brad's voice was loud and theatrical, wanting to draw the attention of other students too. "Must be a really important book," said Tyler, reaching out to try to take Emma's book. Emma reflexively held on to her book tightly. "Let it go, Tyler," said Brad, making a hand gesture to his friend. "Miller wants to chat with us a little. Don't you, Miller?" Jason's jaw tightened. He had heard his daughter's name, and from the tone of voice, he knew this wasn't a friendly conversation. He slowly straightened up, but still couldn't see exactly what was happening. The situation was now more serious. This didn't seem like ordinary teasing. Jason had resolved countless hostage situations in his professional life, but when it came to his own daughter, controlling his emotions was much harder. "You know," said Brad, his voice now lower and more threatening, "who do you think your father is? Mr. Big SWAT officer. We should all be scared, right?" Emma's face paled. She didn't talk much about her father's profession, but everyone at school knew. While some found it cool, others like Brad perceived it as a threat, especially since Brad's father had been arrested for drunk driving last year. "I never said that," said Emma, her voice coming out shaky. She clutched her bag tighter to herself, using it almost like a shield. "But you think it, don't you?" said Brad, leaning forward. "Like your dad could protect you. Just so you know, it's good your cop dad isn't here, or he'd be in trouble too." Some students on the bus had now noticed the situation and were watching silently. No one intervened. Some looked uncomfortable, but none wanted to confront Brad and his friends. Jason was now completely standing up. The verbal abuse toward his daughter was now very evident. His instincts told him to intervene immediately, but years of discipline and composure required a smarter approach. Instead of direct intervention, he decided to observe a little longer. Maybe the situation would diffuse itself. "You think a little bookworm like you has the right to come to school?" said Brad, his voice now louder. "Your place is in a library, not among us." "Or maybe she should stay home and cook for her cop dad," added Zach, laughing crudely. Emma continued to sit silently, her eyes now beginning to fill with tears. "Please, just leave me alone," she said, trying to make her voice sound stronger. "Are you threatening us?" said Brad, his voice now truly threatening. "Or are you going to go home and complain to your dad?" Brad suddenly reached out and grabbed Emma's neck. He wasn't really squeezing, but his fingers were touching the girl's neck. This might have seemed like a joke, but the fear in Emma's eyes was real. Other students started watching with concern, some considering informing the driver. "Where's your dad now, Miller?" said Brad, while Tyler and Zach laughed. "Maybe we should show him how we really handle things." At that moment, everything inside Jason Miller froze. 20 years of SWAT training, countless hostage rescue operations, the professional calm he had shown in hundreds of dangerous situations, all evaporated in an instant. The only thing he saw was that hand touching his daughter. As a father, seeing his daughter's fear and the thought of not being able to protect her caused him to set aside all his professional discipline. In 3 long strides, Jason reached the children. He touched Brad's shoulder in such a way that when the boy turned around in surprise, the face he saw completely shocked him. The expression in Jason's eyes was the kind that would make even the most dangerous criminals tremble. cold, calculating, and definitely threatening. "I think you need to take your hand off my daughter's neck," said Jason, his voice incredibly calm, but his eyes like ice. His voice was low, just enough for Brad and those nearby to hear, but his tone left no room for doubt. Brad's hand immediately withdrew from Emma's neck. Tyler and Zach were frozen, all color drained from their faces. Other students on the bus watched in astonishment, some beginning to whisper, "Is that Emma's dad? Is that the SWAT guy? Brad's in for it now." "Mr. Miller," Brad stammered, "we were just joking." Jason sat down next to the boy, on the edge of the seat. His movements were slow and controlled, but his body language was threatening. He had entered Brad's personal space, almost cornering him. "Do you find it funny to grab someone's neck, Brad?" he asked, deliberately emphasizing the boy's name. Jason knew the names of the boys who were bullying his daughter at school. Even if Emma never said anything, her mother Sarah had told him everything. We were just..." Brad couldn't find the words. His face had gone pale with fear. His hands were trembling. "No, I'm really curious," said Jason, not taking his eyes off Brad's. "Because in my SWAT training, I learned what it means to grab someone's neck. This is a threat, Brad. A very serious threat." Jason's voice was calm and controlled, but each of his words was cutting like a knife. SWAT training had taught him to remain calm even under stress, and right now this training was allowing him to control the anger inside him. "I didn't know," said Brad, finding words with difficulty. "What didn't you know, Brad?" said Jason, looking directly into the boy's eyes. "Didn't you know it was wrong to touch my daughter's neck? Or didn't you know I would be on the bus?" Everyone on the bus was now watching silently. Even the driver was trying to monitor the situation through the rearview mirror, but Jason's calm appearance and control meant he didn't need to intervene. I'm sorry," said Brad, looking truly frightened. Tyler and Zach had also lowered their heads, their faces red with shame. Jason nodded slightly. "I don't want your apology. You should apologize to my daughter." Brad turned to Emma, his face bright red. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, his voice coming out weak. "Really, we were just joking." Emma looked at her father, gratitude and relief in her eyes. However, she also felt a bit of shame that her father had to intervene to protect her. "It's okay," she said quietly, more wanting to end the situation quickly. Jason stood up. "And now, the three of you will return to your seats," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And if I ever see you touch my daughter or anyone else on this bus again, believe me, the consequences will be much more serious." As he said this last sentence, a spark flashed in Jason's eyes. This was the look of a man who had faced dangerous criminals for years. Definite, determined, and absolutely threatening. Brad, Tyler, and Zach almost pushed each other getting back to their seats, heads down, faces red with shame. The other students on the bus continued to watch the incident silently, some relieved, others still surprised. Jason sat down next to Emma and hugged his daughter. "Are you okay, sweetie?" he asked, his voice now completely changed, full of affection. There was concern in his eyes. He wanted to make sure his daughter was all right. Emma nodded. "I'm fine, Dad." "Just, why are you here?" Her voice sounded a bit surprised, a bit relieved. Jason smiled. "I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to spend some time with you before heading to headquarters today." This was partly true, but the real reason was Emma's recent behavior changes. Now he understood the reason. Emma smiled gratefully. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But you were a bit harsh with Brad, weren't you?" Jason thought for a moment. Professionally, perhaps he had been too harsh, but as a father, his reaction was completely natural. "Maybe," he said honestly, "but sometimes people need to learn a lesson to understand the consequences of their actions." Emma nodded. "I guess you're right. Just, it was a bit embarrassing in front of everyone." Jason held his daughter's hand. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but protecting you is my job. And when I saw that boy touch you..." Jason took a deep breath, reliving that moment. "My instincts kicked in." Emma hugged her father. "I understand, and thank you." When the bus stopped in front of the school, Students began to get off one by one. Brad and his friends quickly disembarked with their heads down, avoiding looking at Jason and Emma. Other students watched them with curious glances, some giving Emma encouraging smiles. Jason escorted his daughter to the school entrance. "Have a good day today," he said, kissing Emma's forehead. Emma smiled. "Thanks, Dad. You be careful too, okay? Is there an operation today?" Jason nodded. "I'm always careful. And yes, there's a small operation today, but it's routine. Don't worry." Emma hugged her father one more time. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetie," said Jason with endless love in his eyes as he watched his daughter. As Emma entered the school, Jason paused for a moment and thought. Perhaps he could have spoken differently to Brad and his friends. Maybe he could have been more professional, less threatening. But when he saw that hand on his daughter's neck, all logic disappeared for a moment. His fatherly instincts had overridden his professional training, and perhaps that was completely natural. As Jason walked to his car, he took out his phone and called the school principal. He briefly explained the situation, giving details of the bullying incident. The principal promised to address the situation and thanked Jason for his understanding. That evening, when Jason returned home, Emma met him at the door. There was a smile on her face that he hadn't seen in a long time. "Dad, you won't believe it," she said excitedly. "Brad came up to me at lunch today and really apologized. Not just to me, but to other kids he had bullied too." Jason raised his eyebrows. "Really?" Emma nodded. "Yes, and he seemed very sincere. I think, I think he was really affected by this morning." Jason sighed. Perhaps the harsh response had been right. Sometimes people only change their behavior when they receive a serious warning. "That's good news," he said, hanging up his coat. "Also," Emma continued, "our guidance counselor gave a talk about bullying today. I think the bus incident got around." "Is that so?" said Jason, walking toward the kitchen. "I had spoken with the principal. He must have acted immediately." "Yes, and well, he mentioned you. I mean, without naming names. But he said sometimes an adult's intervention can change a child's life." Emma smiled at her father. "I think he was right." Jason hugged his daughter. "I hope so, sweetie." "Bullying is never acceptable." Emma nodded. "I know, and I think I'll be braver from now on. I mean, about standing up for myself." Jason smiled. "That's wonderful, sweetie. But you know, sometimes asking for help is also an act of courage. If something like this happens again, don't hesitate to tell me or your mom, okay?" "Okay, Dad," said Emma, looking at her father gratefully. The next morning, Emma boarded the school bus again. This time, her father wasn't with her, but she no longer needed him to be. When she got on the bus, she saw Brad sitting in the back seats as usual. But this time, when the boy looked at her, he gave a slight nod in greeting. Tyler and Zach also nodded in the same way, with a shy manner. Emma returned the greeting with a smile and sat in her usual place. But this time, before taking out her book, she looked around. The other students on the bus were looking at her differently, no longer with pity or indifference, but with a kind of respect. Emma felt that something had changed. Perhaps sometimes in the most unexpected moments, life could change. A week later, Jason received a call from the school principal. The principal was inviting Jason to speak at an anti-bullying program at the school. Jason hesitated at first, as SWAT work generally required a low profile, but he accepted with Emma's encouragement. "Dad, they need to hear your story," Emma had said. "Maybe other kids will be encouraged too." On the day of the program, Jason stood before hundreds of students in the school auditorium. He wasn't wearing his official uniform, but a simple shirt and pants. Among the audience were Brad, Tyler, and Zach, sitting in the front rows with attentive expressions on their faces. "Today I want to talk to you about bullying," Jason began. "But I'm going to do this not as a SWAT officer, but as a father." The auditorium was silent, all eyes focused on him. Jason found Emma with his eyes. His daughter was sitting in the front row with a proud expression on her face. "Throughout my life, I've faced dangerous situations, but nothing is as powerful as the fear you feel as a parent. The fear you feel when you see your child suffering." Jason's eyes briefly moved to Brad, but there was no anger in his gaze. "We all make mistakes," he continued, "me included. But what's important is whether we learn from these mistakes. Jason looked at the students in the auditorium. Hundreds of young people were listening to him attentively. Many experts had come to this school to talk about bullying, but none had spoken from the perspective of a SWAT officer and a father. Bullying is not just physical violence, said Jason, beginning to slowly walk around the auditorium. Verbal abuse, humiliation, exclusion. These are all bullying, and they're all harmful. Maybe some of you think this is just a joke, but you should know that you're leaving permanent marks on someone's life. Some students lowered their heads with shame or thoughtfulness. Jason looked at Brad again. The boy was now listening very carefully. In the SWAT team, before every operation, we emphasize one thing: using force is the last resort. We try to solve problems by talking, understanding, empathizing. Using force only comes into play when no other option remains. Jason paused for a moment, wanting this metaphor to sink into everyone's mind. The same principle applies at school. If you're strong, you should use that strength not to hurt others, but to help them. Being popular, athletic, or physically strong doesn't give you the right to oppress others. On the contrary, it gives you the responsibility to protect them. Jason looked at Emma. There was pride and love in his daughter's eyes. Then he turned to Brad. There was a thoughtful expression on the boy's face. "Last week, I witnessed bullying against my daughter," Jason said openly. He didn't name names, but everyone had heard about the incident. "And maybe I reacted too harshly, because I'm also human, and my instinct to protect my child is stronger than anything. But thinking about it now, maybe I could have approached it differently." This confession surprised many students in the auditorium. It was unusual for an adult, especially a SWAT officer, to admit making a mistake. You see, instead of using force, we should prefer understanding and empathy. This applies to both those who bully and those who are bullied. Sometimes people hurt others because of their own pain or fears. This doesn't justify their behavior, but it might be a starting point for understanding. When Jason finished his speech, everyone in the auditorium was giving him a standing ovation. Emma was in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Brad and his friends were also standing and applauding, with thoughtful expressions on their faces. After the program, Brad approached Jason. He no longer looked frightened, just serious and thoughtful. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice now confident but respectful, "I just wanted to apologize again. What I did wasn't right." Jason looked at the boy. In Brad's eyes, he saw genuine remorse and perhaps some understanding. "Thank you, Brad," he said, extending his hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Brad gratefully shook his hand. I'm sorry about the things about your dad. I mean, about his arrest. I guess I blamed you." Jason nodded. "I understand, but you should know that we're just doing our job. It wasn't personal." "I know," said Brad. "I understand now. And maybe I can help too. I mean, with the anti-bullying program, maybe I can share my own experience." Jason smiled. "That's a great idea, Brad. I'm sure your story will inspire other students." That day, something changed at Highland High School. Perhaps everyone had learned to redefine power and courage. True power wasn't in grabbing someone's neck, but in having the courage to admit mistakes and change. And true courage wasn't always about using force, but sometimes choosing peace and understanding. The weeks-long anti-bullying program completely changed the atmosphere of the school. Brad and his friends were now recognized not as bullies, but as leaders who helped other students at the school. As for Emma, she no longer hid behind her books, but was a more active and confident student at school. One evening, as Emma and Jason sat at home, the girl looked at her father. "You know, that day on the bus, with all your SWAT training, you could have taken Brad down," she said thoughtfully. Jason smiled. "Yes, I could have, but you didn't." "Why?" Jason thought for a moment. The answer to this question was complex. "Because sometimes the strongest response is not to use force," he said. "True courage is being able to control yourself. That's the first thing we learn in SWAT, knowing when to use our power and when not to." Emma nodded. "Brad told me something today. He said that day on the bus, he would never forget the look in your eyes. And that look made him feel truly scared for the first time in his life." Jason sighed. That wasn't exactly the effect I wanted. But, but it worked, said Emma, completing her father's sentence. It gave him a reason to think. And now he's changed. People can change, said Jason, holding his daughter's hand. Everyone makes mistakes, but what's important is learning from these mistakes. Emma thought about her father's words. You know, maybe someday I could be a police officer. Or maybe a guidance counselor. I want to help people. Jason smiled. You're going to be an amazing person, sweetie. Whatever profession you choose. Emma hugged her father. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Thank you, said Jason, stroking his daughter's hair. You teach me to be a better person every day. And indeed, sometimes life's greatest lessons come from the most unexpected moments, from the most unexpected people. That day on the bus, not just Brad, but everyone, including Emma, had learned a valuable lesson about what true power and courage really are. A few months later, at the end of the school year, a great change was observed at Highland High School. Bullying incidents had dropped to almost zero, and there was more solidarity and respect among students. Brad had become the captain of the school basketball team and was using his leadership position to be a positive example to other students. As for Emma, she had begun writing for the school newspaper, using her voice to be heard and inspire other students. In one article, she recounted what had happened that day on the bus, without naming names, but honestly. At the end of the article, she wrote, "Sometimes, even in our darkest moments, an unexpected hero can appear. But perhaps the real hero is within us, the part of us that has the courage to change and grow." This article made a big impact in the school community, and Emma received support messages from many students. Even Brad sent her a note. You're right. The hero inside us is sometimes the person who surprises us the most. Jason watched his daughter's achievements with pride. As a SWAT team leader, he saved lives every day. But perhaps the most important rescue had taken place that day on the bus. Not just saving his daughter, but perhaps Brad too, by showing the boy a different path. Sometime, said Jason one evening, as Emma's graduation day approached, the smallest interventions create the biggest changes. Just like a butterfly's wing flap can start a storm on the other side of the world. Emma smiled. The butterfly effect. We learned about it in physics class. Yes, said Jason. And maybe that day on the bus, we started a butterfly effect for all of us? Did you enjoy this story? If so, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed bullying against someone at an unexpected moment? Or perhaps there has been a hero in your life who intervened just in time. See you in our next video.